When Matthew's estranged father died, he inherited $1 million company and a list of people marked for execution. He thought he was stepping into a boardroom. Instead, he walked into a war his father started, and a kill switch only he could trigger. The lawyer's office smelled like dust and old paper. Thick books lined the walls, spines faded, corners frayed from years of indifference. Everything was polished, but nothing felt clean. Matthew Crane sat stiffly in the leather chair, suit too tight in the shoulders. Across from him, attorney Linwood flipped through a manila folder with a practiced slowness, as if delaying the inevitable. Matthew didn't speak, his jaw clenched, there was nothing to say. The old man was dead. Cancer had taken him fast. 6 weeks ago, Gerald Crane had been barking orders from the 12th floor office like a man planning to live another 50 years. Now he was ash in a marble urn, and the only thing left was this paperwork. Linwood cleared his throat, thin lips twitching into a sympathetic frown. "Your father left explicit instructions," he began, sliding the folder across the desk. "He's named you as the sole heir to Crane and Whitmore Logistics." Matthew's eyes flicked to the document. The letters danced on the page like they didn't belong to him. Crane and Whitmore, the company that had swallowed his father's life and in some ways stolen parts of his childhood too. "I don't want it," he said flatly. "You don't have much of a choice," Linwood replied, voice dry. "The board's already been notified. You're the new CEO, effective immediately." Matthew's mind reeled. This wasn't part of the plan. He'd built his own life teaching history at a private high school in Connecticut, married to a woman who hated suits and stock portfolios. They'd talked about adopting a second child this year. A logistics company wasn't on the vision board. "Why me?" he muttered. Linwood gave a half shrug. "He trusted you, or maybe he ran out of options." Matthew snorted bitter. "That sounds more like him." But Linwood didn't smile. "There's something else," the lawyer said, pausing. "Of course there was." Linwood reached into a locked drawer and pulled out another envelope. This one was thinner, sealed in wax. Red wax, dramatic, old school. It bore the Crane family crest, 2 falcons and a Latin phrase Matthew had long since forgotten. "Your father wanted you to read this privately," Linwood said, sliding it forward. Matthew hesitated, fingers brushing the seal. He didn't want to open it, not because he feared what was inside, but because some small, foolish part of him still believed that once it was opened, something irreversible would happen. He tore it open anyway. The letter was handwritten. Gerald's script was rigid and sharp, as if chiseled into the page. "Matthew, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I know I was the father you needed. I had my reasons, none of them good, but I need you to take the company. There are things I couldn't fix. Mistakes, debts, not all financial. Some are darker. Be careful who you trust." It ended abruptly, no signature, no love, Dad. Just a cold silence that echoed louder than anything else in the room. Matthew sat there, knuckles white around the letter. His heart thudded slow and heavy. Mistakes, debts, not all financial. "What kind of debts?" he asked. Linwood didn't answer right away. He stood, walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out another file. "This," he said, laying it on the desk, "is where the story begins." Inside the folder were balance sheets, bank statements, and photographs. Some of the numbers didn't make sense, some of the photos didn't either. A warehouse in Queens with a half-burned sign, a ledger with names scratched out, a loan agreement with a lender Matthew didn't recognize, but the signature at the bottom was unmistakably his father's. And then at the very back, a photo of a man Matthew hadn't seen in 20 years, Arturo Benetti. The name made his stomach turn. Arturo had once been Gerald's business partner until he vanished in the middle of a federal investigation. Rumor was he'd gone underground, or worse. "Your father owed him," Linwood said quietly, "and now you do." Matthew stared at the photo. Something deep inside him, something old and angry, started to wake up. 3 days after the reading of the will, Matthew found himself standing in front of the warehouse from the photo. 4612 Gallagher Avenue, Queens. It looked even worse in person. A rusted chain-link fence encircled the perimeter like it was trying to keep a secret in, not out. The sign was gone now, just twisted metal clinging to a charred beam. Pigeons scattered when he stepped through the broken gate. He didn't know what he was looking for. Closure? Clues? Maybe just proof that his father's empire wasn't built on concrete but on rot and old ghosts. Inside, it smelled of oil, mold, and something sour. Dust curled in the light shafts from cracked windows. Stacks of forgotten crates lined the walls, some still bearing Crane and Whitmore stamps, others marked with symbols Matthew didn't recognize. Cyrillic, possibly Albanian. He stepped deeper in, boots crunching glass. The silence felt thick, predatory. His phone had no signal. Then he saw the office door. It was bolted shut with a padlock, rusted but intact. A long-forgotten crowbar lay nearby. After a minute of struggling, the lock gave way with a sharp crack. The door creaked open. Inside, more papers, more dust, and a smell that turned his stomach decay. Something had died here long ago. He covered his mouth with his sleeve and stepped over the threshold. The office was small. A desk, some filing cabinets, a calendar from 2003 still on the wall, circled in red on November 7th. Beneath it, in crooked writing, end. What ended that day, Matthew didn't know, but he took the calendar down and stuffed it in his bag. On the desk was an old binder labeled Transact. 108. Inside were rows of coded entries. Names, dates, amounts, some crossed out, some with red stars beside them. One name jumped out at him, L. Dempsey, next to the sum of $1.2 million. Underneath, scrawled in pen, Blackburn's girl, do not engage. He snapped a photo of the page. Behind the desk was a safe. Its door had been torn open long ago, jagged metal hanging loose like a ripped mouth, empty inside. He was about to leave when he heard it, a faint shuffle, from the back of the warehouse. He froze. "Hello," he called out, voice low, but it cracked anyway. No responses. He backed out of the office slowly, crowbar in hand now. The silence returned, but now it was tense like the moment before a thunderclap. He took another step. "Looking for something." The voice was smooth, confident, male, and close. Matthew turned sharply. A man in a dark coat stood near the loading dock doors, hands in his pockets, face shadowed. Maybe mid-40s, wiry, like someone who stayed dangerous even when still. I'm just here on behalf of my father," Matthew said, heart hammering. "Gerald Crane." The man's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "So the boy comes home," he said, almost amused. "Did he tell you what he did?" Matthew didn't answer. The man took a step closer. "Your father made promises, he broke them, people bled for that." Matthew's grip on the crowbar tightened. "Who are you?" "Someone who paid." The man pulled something from his pocket and tossed it, a small black flash drive. It clattered at Matthew's feet. "Gives that to your friend at the law firm, Linwood Wright, he'll know." "Wait." But the man was already backing away, disappearing into the shadows behind the dock. When Matthew reached the door, there was no one there, no car, no footsteps, just the hum of a distant train and the growing cold. Back in his rental car, Matthew stared at the flash drive in his palm. His fingers trembled slightly. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in the dark living room of his father's Manhattan apartment, now his, watching the city pulse and breathe outside the windows. The TV was on, volume low, some pundit shouting about markets and trade wars and tariffs. None of it mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't know. "Too late to run now, Mr. Crane." He stared at it until the screen dimmed. Somewhere beneath the surface of the world he thought he knew, there was another world, a quieter, colder one. And now it was watching him back. Matthew met Linwood in a small diner on the Lower East Side, the kind with cracked red vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. It was 6:45 a.m., and the place was mostly empty except for a few city workers in reflective vests and a man asleep over a plate of pancakes. Linwood looked out of place, too clean, too deliberate. His coat was dry even though it had been raining all morning. "You said it was urgent," Linwood said, glancing at the flash drive as Matthew slid it across the table. He didn't touch it. "A man gave this to me at the warehouse," Matthew said you'd know what to do with it." Linwood hesitated. His fingers finally closed around the drive like it was radioactive. He didn't plug it in. He didn't ask who the man was. Instead, he asked something stranger. "Did he mention Archero?" "No," Matthew lied. Linwood nodded slowly. "Smart, keep it that way." "What's on it?" Evidence or a warning? He slipped the drive into his coat pocket and signaled for the check. "Don't go back to that warehouse." Matthew leaned in. "You knew about all of this, the debts, the deals. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Linwood stared at him. "Because knowing gets people killed." A silence fell between them, broken only by the scrape of cutlery and the low hum of a refrigerator behind the counter. "Your father once told me," Linwood said finally, "that power doesn't corrupt, it attracts the already corrupted. He thought he was different, that he could swim in those waters and stay clean." "And did he?" "No," Linwood stood, "he drowned." Later that day, Matthew returned to the Crane and Whitmore offices for the first time since the funeral. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was longer than he remembered. Each ding felt like a countdown. When the doors opened, the receptionist stood quickly. "Mr. Crane, welcome back." The office was unchanged, polished, cold, and too quiet. His father's glass-walled suite at the end of the hallway loomed like a mausoleum. The desk had been cleared, except for a note card placed neatly in the center. One sentence typed. Trust no one named Whitmore. Matthew blinked. The message wasn't signed, but there were only two people who would dare place something like that in Gerald Crane's former office. One was dead. The other was Henry Whitmore's daughter, Eva. He found her in the logistics department, sleeves rolled up, yelling at a junior analyst over missed numbers. When she saw Matthew, her expression shifted from irritation to something like pity. "You look like your father when he was losing," she said. He didn't flinch. "Someone left me a message, said not to trust anyone named Whitmore." She snorted, then they were smarter than most. They stared at each other for a long moment. Eva had been Gerald's protege once, sharp, ruthless, and loyal. Her father, Henry, co-founded the company and later vanished in a merger scandal that nearly bankrupted them. Rumor was Gerald had forced him out. "What happened to your father?" Matthew asked. Eva shrugged. "He's either drinking himself blind in Argentina or buried under a parking garage. Take your pick." "And you stayed." She looked away. "I thought I could fix it from the inside." "Fix what?" She hesitated. "You don't know what you're holding, do you?" Matthew's silence was answer enough. Eva leaned in. "Your father wasn't just in debt, he was a custodian of something much worse. A ledger kept off books, off systems, code name Transact 108. Matthew's breath caught. "I saw the binder," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "Then you need to leave. That ledger, it's a kill list in the wrong hands. You think these names are just numbers. Some of them are federal informants, whistleblowers. One of them disappeared last week in Chicago. She was found in a reservoir with her eyes sewn shut." Matthew felt cold all over. "Who has the list now?" Eva looked toward the executive hallway. "Who do you think?" By nightfall, the city felt different, like it was breathing slower, holding something back. Matthew sat in his father's penthouse, lights off, curtains drawn, staring at the skyline as though it might offer answers. But all he could see were reflections of himself, of his father, of a life built on bones and ledgers. He pulled out the calendar he'd taken from the warehouse. November 7th circled in red, end, 22 years ago. Matthew had been 10. He vaguely remembered his father leaving on a business trip that week, coming home with bruised knuckles and a haunted silence that lasted days. His mother asked questions. Gerald had only poured himself whiskey. That was also the last time Matthew saw Arturo Beniti in their house. He flipped the calendar page over. There in faded pencil was an address in Brooklyn. No street name, just a number and a building code, 84B East Yard. At 11:00 p.m. he drove. The building was buried behind a scrapyard, locked by two rusted gates and guarded by silence. Matthew climbed the side fence, cutting his hand in the process. Blood oozed down his palm, warm and dumb. Inside, the air smelled of metal and neglect. Rows of shipping containers lined the backlot, forgotten relics. He found 84B in the far corner, its exterior covered in graffiti, one door slightly ajar. He pushed it open. Light flickered from an overhead bulb. Inside was a makeshift office, dust-covered computers, and a giant corkboard with faces, strings, and pins, the kind you only saw in movies or manic breakdowns. At the center, circled 3 times in black marker, Gerald Crane. Someone had been watching his father. Beside the board was a camera blinking. Matthew lunged for it, yanked the plug. Then he heard the door click shut behind him. He turned. A man stood in the shadow, half his face in darkness, the other illuminated just enough to reveal a long, jagged scar down the side of his cheek. His voice, when he spoke, was low and guttural, familiar in a way that made Matthew's skin crawl. "I've waited 20 years to see a Crane come back here." Matthew didn't move. "You knew my father?" he asked carefully. "I buried what was left of him," the man replied, stepping closer, "and I carried what he tried to run from." He extended a file, a folder stained with age and something darker. Matthew hesitated, then took it. Inside, a photo of a young woman, early 20s, hands cuffed behind her back, blood on her shirt, Gerald Crane's signature on a confession order, dated November 6, 2003. She was the accountant, the man said. She found out about the offshore accounts, the weapons contracts. She was ready to go to the feds. What happened to her? She disappeared. Her body turned up 4 years later in a shipping container bound for Tripoli. Matthew looked up, sick. My father made a deal to protect the company, the man interrupted. But in doing so, he sold something worse than stock options. He sold people. The man stepped back into the shadows. Everything you think you know about your legacy, it's a noose. Matthew stood frozen. Then why give me this? He asked. The man's eyes gleamed. Because I want to see what a son does when the sins of his father knock. The door slammed open behind him, footsteps. Matthew ducked just in time. A figure tackled the scarred man, shouting in a language Matthew didn't understand. Gunshots rang out, sparks flew from the walls. Matthew hit the ground, crawled toward the back exit, heart pounding like war drums. He made it outside and ran. Ran like the truth was on fire behind him. Back in the penthouse, Matthew locked every door and placed the folder in the wall safe behind a painting. Then he sat in the dark again, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Eva Whitmore's number. He finally called. "We need to talk," he said when she answered. Her voice was sharp. "Where are you?" "Somewhere I shouldn't have been." A pause. Then welcome to the family business. The next morning, Matthew met Eva in the back room of a butcher shop in the Bronx. Not exactly neutral ground, but safer than the office. No ears in the walls, no eyes behind glass. She was already waiting, arms crossed, boots muddy from rain. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "I think I met ones." He tossed the folder onto the table. Eva flipped through it in silence, her face unreadable. When she reached the photo of the woman, the accountant, her jaw tightened. "I've seen her before," she murmured. "My father kept a file just like this, locked drawer, third cabinet." "Is it still there?" She shook her head. When he disappeared, the office was scrubbed. Nothing left but his tie rack and a paperclip shaped like a noose. Matthew frowned. Who would clean out an office like that? "Someone with a reason to bury a trail," she said, then added, "or someone afraid of what the next page says." They both stared at the folder. "There's something missing," Matthew said. "The list I saw in the binder transact, 108, it was numbered, but half the entries were redacted or gone entirely." Eva nodded slowly. Those names weren't just debts, they were leverage, people who could burn everything down if they opened their mouths. "So who has the unredacted list?" She looked at him. "Your father did, at least he used to." "A bit." Matthew's mind flashed back to the safe behind the painting, but it wasn't big enough to hold the original binder. "You think he moved it?" he asked. Eva's eyes narrowed, not moved, fragmented, scattered, hidden like breadcrumbs. Matthew leaned forward. "If we found the full list, what could we do with it?" Her response was instant: "Burn it." That took him aback. "That's it." "If you publish it, people die. If you bury it, others do. The only option is to end the game." Before he could respond, Eva's phone buzzed. She read the screen, went pale. "What?" he asked. "It's from someone who shouldn't have my number." She handed it to him. The message read, "Both of you are looking for something you won't survive finding. Go home, Ms. Whitmore, he's already marked." Underneath was a photo, grainy nighttime, taken from across the street. It showed Matthew entering his apartment building. Matthew's blood went cold. "We're being watched." Eva pocketed the phone. "Not watched, hunted." They spent the rest of the day in transit, changing locations, avoiding credit cards. Eva made calls, pulled favors. By sunset, they were tucked into a safe house in Queens, bare walls, no Wi-Fi, only one light bulb in the kitchen. It felt like a bunker, appropriate. Matthew pulled the calendar back out. What if November 7th wasn't just a date? What if it was a code, a timestamp for a drop or an event? Eva nodded. It could mean a shipment, or a deletion order, or a transaction. He flipped the calendar page. On the back of December 3rd, scribbled in faint red ink, was a number, 231,876. Eva's breath caught. That's a port manifest ID. They found the record, archived, purged from digital systems but not from port logs. Shipment 231,876 had been marked as destroyed in customs. No return, no recipient, no sender. Except Eva traced the broker, a shell company under Crane and Whitmore. "What was in the container?" Matthew asked. She hesitated. 6 bodies, she said, wrapped in plastic, no names, no investigation. The report was buried under a security clearance clause, military contracts, black budget. "Why would my fathers?" "Because they were leveraged too," she said quietly. "Probably defectors, maybe witnesses. Dead men don't talk." Matthew stood and paced. Everything in him screamed to walk away, but he couldn't, not now, not after this. "Then we find the rest of the list," he said. Eva looked at him. "You're turning into him," she said. "No," he replied, "I'm making it right." Outside, a man watched through binoculars from across the street. He held a phone to his ear. "They've found the manifest." A voice on the other end replied, calm, deadly. "Then it's time to trigger the fail-safe." The next lead came from an unexpected place, Gerald Crane's old wristwatch. Matthew found it in a drawer at the penthouse, tucked inside a worn leather case. It had stopped at 3:17 a.m., the glass face slightly cracked. At first, he dismissed it, just a broken heirloom. But when he turned it over, there was an engraving he'd never noticed before. AL 317, don't forget. He showed it to Eva that evening. AL, she said aloud, Alder Lane, that's in Cold Spring. Matthew stared. Cold Spring was where his family used to spend summers before his mother left, before the company devoured his father whole. The address, it turned out, was a small cottage tucked behind overgrown hedges just off the Hudson River. He hadn't been there in years. The drive-up was silent, tense. The only sound was the tires crunching gravel. The house looked untouched. Windows boarded up, chimney cracked. Nature had started reclaiming it. Vines crept up the walls like fingers trying to drag it back into the dirt. Inside, it smelled of rot and dust and something sweetly decayed. The floorboards groaned under their weight. In the back room, once his childhood playroom, they found the safe. Built into the floor under a loose plank, old-school combination lock. The code was scratched into the inside of the wristwatch's case. 110,703, November 7, 2003. It clicked open with a soft, awful finality. Inside was a manila envelope labeled only, Blackmark. Eva opened it. What they found made both of them go quiet. A list of names, dozens, all tied to offshore accounts. Code names, dates, surveillance photos, many crossed out in red, but some, disturbingly, were marked with a green. At the top of the page, Blackmark Program Executable List. Activation date TBD. Matthew turned to Eva. "What is this?" Her voice was hollow. "It's not a debt list, it's a kill protocol." A single note was clipped to the back. "If I die, activate the seal, protect the company, burn the names, trust no one. GC." Matthew stared. His father hadn't just been protecting secrets. He designed a failsafe, one that triggered when he died. The deaths weren't random, they were programmed. "Who has access to the activation?" he asked. Eva looked sick. "Only two people, your father, and someone he designated as executor." Matthew froze. "That's me." They drove back through the night, hearts racing. At a rest stop off I-87, Matthew vomited behind a dumpster while Eva stood guard, arms folded, face pale. When he returned, he looked 10 years older. "He made me the switch," Matthew said. "Then someone will come for you," she replied. And they did. 2 hours later, as they neared the city limits, a black SUV rammed their car from behind. They swerved off the road, tires shrieking. Another SUV blocked the front. They were boxed in. 3 men in dark suits stepped out, faces blank, eyes cold. Eva reached for her gun, too late. One man pulled the door open and yanked Matthew out by the collar. "The folder, now." He didn't answer. "They hit him." Eva shouted, tried to lunge forward. A gun was pressed to her temple. Matthew tasted blood. "You activate the list," the man growled. "You shut it down or we start with her." Then headlights. A pickup truck roared into view, horn blaring. It smashed into the SUV, blocking the road. The men scattered, shots rang out. Eva ducked. Matthew scrambled behind the car. The pickup's driver leaned out. It was the scarred man from the warehouse. He shouted, "Move." Matthew and Eva dove into the back seat. The truck peeled off, tires spitting gravel, bullets pinging off the fender. No one spoke for several minutes, just the whine of the engine and the sickening sound of fear breathing. Finally, Matthew whispered, "Why are you helping us?" The scarred man glanced at him through the mirror. "Because I was number 72 on the list." The safe house this time was different, deep in the Catskills, shielded by forests and old allies. The scarred man, who introduced himself only as Shay, had once worked with Gerald Crane, not under him, alongside him, before things fell apart, before Gerald chose the company over the people who built it. Shay wasn't just number 72 on the Blackmark list, he was the one who created it. "I was the architect," he told Matthew, his voice low. "Your father wanted a system that could silence threats without fingerprints. I built the framework," he filled in the names. They sat around a cabin table lit by a single oil lamp. Outside, rain pounded the roof like a warning. I warned him what would happen, Shay continued. That you can't engineer morality. He said it wasn't about morality, it was about survival. Matthew opened the black mark folder again. Dozens of names, executions disguised as accidents. Eva sat beside him, her hands trembling despite herself. You said if the list was activated, people would die, Matthew said. Shay nodded. The command structure is dormant until two codes are used, one to open the channel, one to give the order. And I have one of them, Matthew said. You have the kill switch, Shay corrected, which means you also have the power to end it permanently. Matthew looked up. How? There's a backdoor built into the original Blackmark program, a failsafe. If both codes are entered simultaneously and one of them is corrupted intentionally, the entire network self-destructs. Files, triggers, surveillance, all gone. Eva's voice was hoarse, but if someone finds out. They won't, Shay said, unless someone tells them. A heavy silence followed. Matthew stared at the code string, at the list. At the note his father left, protect the company, burn the names. The company had already taken too much. His childhood, his mother, the truth. It would not take more. He stood. Where do we do this? They drove through the night to a data center in rural Pennsylvania, one of Crane and Whitmore's covert mirror servers. It had once backed military contracts. Now it hummed quietly, storing ghosts. Matthew sat at the terminal, Eva keyed in her access code. Shay uploaded the override software. Matthew stared at the screen. Confirm execute destruct protocol. Yes and no. His hand hovered. What would he do? Eva asked softly. Matthew didn't answer. He thought instead about that cracked watch, frozen in time, as if his father had once tried to stop something and failed. He pressed yes. A flurry of lines cascaded down the screen. Code purging, triggers severed, surveillance loops collapsing like dominoes. Then silence. Matthew stepped back. It was done. No more debts, no more executions. Just names erased from a machine that had no soul. Weeks passed. The news quietly reported server anomalies at a private logistics firm. A few board members resigned. A scandal was hinted at, then buried. A congressional hearing was canceled. No bodies were found. Matthew sold his shares in Crane and Whitmore. He donated the proceeds to a trust fund in the name of the woman from the photo, the accountant who died for truth. He never learned her full story, but he made sure no one else would have to. He returned to teaching. He planted a tree where the cottage used to be. He gave his daughter the watch, no longer ticking, but now carrying a different meaning. Eva disappeared. Rumor had it she moved overseas, changed her name, started a new life. Sometimes Matthew received postcards with no return address, just landscapes. Sometimes a single sentence still burning the map. Shay, he vanished too, like a ghost set free. And Matthew? He lived not to forget but to remember what power can do, what silence can cost, and what it means to choose legacy over loyalty. One night he stood on the roof of a quiet building, staring at the skyline of a city that once tried to consume him. Behind him, the wind whispered through the steel like a voice he almost recognized. But he didn't turn around. He didn't need to. The story was over. And this time it stayed buried.